know that feeling when something inside you finally loosens? You're still capable, still driven and responsible, but the urgency softens. You notice you're no longer hanging on to every decision. You stop replaying conversations and rehearsing explanations in your head. You're no longer bracing for impact. And what surprises you most is not that you've slowed down. It's that things start moving more smoothly. You begin to realize that forcing wasn't strength, it was tension. And tension takes energy. Alignment, on the other hand, alignment gives it back. Once you feel that distinction in your body, it's impossible to ignore. You start noticing how often you've been pushing against yourself instead of moving with what's already available. Life doesn't suddenly become perfect, but it becomes cooperative. Welcome back to the Motivated Savages podcast, where we live bold, lead fearless, and ignite our path forward. I'm Jody Savage, and today we're going to explore living in the flow. Not the romanticized version that sounds like checking out, or the version that waits for signs instead of making decisions. We're talking about the grounded, embodied flow where action still happens, but it's guided by clarity instead of pressure. The kind where inspired action leads to real, tangible results. Where timing feels natural instead of frantic. The kind where momentum builds without burnout. And I want to talk about this now because it's not theory for me. It's lived experience, and it's happening in real time. I used to think progress had to feel hard. If I wasn't tired, I assumed I wasn't doing enough. If something felt easy, I didn't trust it. If there wasn't struggle, I questioned whether it was real. That belief kept me productive, but it also depleted me. What I didn't understand yet was that I was confusing effort with effectiveness. Effort is energy spent. Effectiveness is energy multiplied. Effort can move things forward. Effectiveness builds something that lasts. When you're forcing, everything costs more than it should. Decisions take longer. Ideas feel heavy. Progress feels fragile. But when you're moving in flow, things still require work, but the work doesn't drain you. It clarifies you. That's the difference. Flow is subtle. It doesn't feel urgent. It feels right. There's a steadiness to it, a quiet confidence, a sense that you don't need to rush because you're not behind. You still think and plan, you still show up, but there's less friction. You take a step and the ground meets you. You speak and your words land without effort. You act and the response feels proportional, not exaggerated or delayed. Flow isn't luck. It's what happens when your internal state and your external actions stop fighting each other. This is where people often misunderstand flow. Flow does not mean waiting. It doesn't mean sitting back or avoiding responsibility. Flow still involves action, sometimes bold action. The difference is that inspired action doesn't come from panic. It comes from clarity. You don't talk yourself into it. You don't need reassurance. You don't need 10 opinions. You move because it's time. And when you move from that place, results often come faster. Not because you rushed, but because nothing was blocking the path. The indie author bookstore is a perfect example of this. The idea came to me, and I tossed it around for a bit. I learned what the independent author landscape looked like. And when it felt ready, I didn't try to future-proof every possible outcome. I built it, I opened it, and I let it be seen. And what happened next was effortless in the best way. Authors reached out. Readers showed up. Titles flowed in naturally. No chasing, no convincing, no pushing. That's flow in action. The biggest shift wasn't external, it was internal. I didn't ask, how do I make this work? I asked, is this aligned right now? And that single question created space. When the answer was yes, action felt clean. When the answer is no, waiting feels responsible instead of lazy. Now that I trust that rhythm, life responds differently. Opportunities arrive without force, and ideas come into my mind with more form. It's like momentum being built without exhaustion. And this is important to say out loud. Flow is not abstract. It produces outcomes, real ones, sustainable ones. But they don't arrive with chaos. They arrive steadily and they stack quickly. They compound over time. What looks like sudden success is almost always the result of consistent, aligned movement beneath the surface. Flow doesn't rush results. It makes them inevitable. Now, on the flip side, letting go of force can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've been rewarded for pushing, if control once felt like safety, or if slowing down feels like failure. Flow asks you to trust yourself more than the noise around you. And that's not passive. That's discipline. Flow is what self-trust looks like in action. You stop narrating your decisions or explaining your pace. You stop reacting to every opinion. And you move when it's aligned. You pause when it's aligned. And the more you honor that rhythm, the clearer it becomes. So let's take a moment right here. Ask yourself, where am I pushing when listening would carry me further? Where am I trying to force momentum instead of allowing it to unfold? Where is speed costing me progress? Flow isn't something you have to create. It's already present. Your only job is to notice it. Now, I want to give you an example of what this actually feels like in real time. Flow feels like opening an indie bookstore and watching it fill with nearly 60 titles in the first week. Not because you chase people down, but because they found you. It feels like building a space where authors don't compete for scraps, but choose to rise together. It feels like collaboration instead of comparison. I didn't launch the bookstore with a loud announcement or a sense of urgency. I built it because it felt aligned, because it felt necessary, because it felt like the next right step. And what happened next was magical. Authors showed up ready. Readers are leaning in, and conversations are flowing naturally. The energy is generous, not guarded. That's flow. Not forcing growth or hoarding opportunity. Not scrambling to prove legitimacy. Flow is when the right people recognize the right space and step into it. When effort turns into shared momentum. It's when it stops being about you and starts being about the collective. And that's the part people miss. Flow doesn't just move your life forward, it invites others into it. When you act from alignment instead of pressure, you don't just create results, you create community. You create space and you build something sturdy enough for other people to stand with you. That's when you know you're not just in flow, you're building something that lasts. Now, before we move on to the challenge, I want to name something quietly important. Because flow doesn't mean everything is perfect or that every step is easy. And it doesn't mean you rush past the wins on your way to the next thing. Flow is being held together by gratitude, and not performative gratitude, but the steady kind that notices what's working while it's happening. I feel grateful for every yes, every aligned conversation, every door that opened without force, every moment where effort met clarity instead of resistance. I'm grateful for the space taking shape, for the authors who showed up ready to build something together, for the conversations that didn't need convincing, and for the momentum that feels shared, not strained. If you don't pause and acknowledge what's unfolding, you start chasing instead of receiving. Gratitude is what keeps flow clean. It grounds the movement and steadies the pace. This season isn't about rushing forward, it's about recognizing what's rising. And that recognition matters. Because when you acknowledge what's working, you train yourself to see alignment more clearly. You move with awareness instead of urgency. You build from presence instead of pressure. That's how flow sustains itself. And this is where I want to bring you in, not as someone listening from the outside, but as someone who is already part of this. Because flow doesn't belong to a select few. It responds to attention. It deepens when it's noticed, and it strengthens when it's honored. So before we move into action, I want you to take a breath with me. I want you to notice one win, one moment, one sign of alignment you might have rushed past. Now hold on to it, name it, and let it land. And from that place, let's step into the challenge together. This week, we're going to practice sound judgment instead of speed. Before acting on something, ask yourself, does this feel grounded or does it feel rushed? If it feels grounded, move. If it feels rushed, pause. At the end of the week, reflect on those moments. Where did things unfold more easily? Where did energy return instead of drain? Where did I feel supported instead of strained? That's flow, teaching you how to listen. I'm Jody Savage, and this is the Motivated Savages podcast. Live bold, ignite your path, that's the Savage way. If this message resonated, share it with someone who needs permission to stop forcing and start flowing. And if you want to carry this message with you, check out our merch line at motivatedsavages.com. We've designed gear to remind you to live bold every day. Together, we're building the Savage community, a movement of people choosing purpose, growth, and bold living.